Hello, everyone. It's Bryan Kluger with High Def Digest, Boomstick Comics, and Screen Rant. Here today, talk with you about the movie The Beach House.
I'm just having so much fun.
I need a hospital.
Oh, please, I need help!
Don't be scared. Don't be scared.
Whoo! You can read the review on High Def Digest. The film is like if H.P. Lovecraft and Stephen King went on a vacation to the beach together. Yes. I had the pleasure to talk with the filmmakers and actors of the film, specifically with the director Jeffrey A. Brown, producer Andrew Korkin, and actor Noah Gros. A fantastic talk. Enjoy the video and be sure to watch The Beach House only on Shudder.
Yes, and we have three amazing talents from the film today. In one corner, weighing in as a producer extraordinaire, intercontinental champion. Oh my goodness, Andrew Korkin, how are you?
I'm well, Bryan. Thank you. I'm glad you didn't guess my weight. That would have been a little bit depressing. I've been baking a lot in the quarantine, so it's a little bit above my punching class usually.
Wonderful. I hear you. No weights here today. I'd be too scared for that. And then in the other corner, weighing in as the amazing, legendary actor Noah Gros. Am I pronouncing that right?
It's close. It's Gros.
Gros, yeah.
I guess it's French, so you could say it with an accent if you wanted to be like pompous, but Le Gros is fine. I don't really care.
Wonderful. Main actor in this film. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you? Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to be here. I'm doing excellent here in hot Dallas, Texas. It's wonderful. And then, of course, we have the fantastic filmmaker of the land, Jeffrey A. Brown. Oh, my goodness. How is it going up in New York?
Good to be here, Bryan. Thank you.
Good. Glad to have you all here. We're going to talk about The Beach House. But first, for each of you, we'll start with Jeff. Where did it all begin for you in film? Was it something your parents showed you growing up? Was it going to the movie theater for the first time? Where did it all begin?
Yeah, I blame my parents, in addition to just being into film, but also not completely discouraging me pursuing it. There were some shaky moments in the early days, but it started with them. My father's a film fan, and then my mother kind of she's as well. I mean, it was just something kind of inherent in our family that I thought all families were kind of into movies like we were. And then I just kind of followed it, into college, to film school, and just stuck with it. I worked on, a lot of movies in kind of, before making this, and it's just been something that's been with me for a long time. So I don't know anything different. It's always there.
It's always been there. Do you remember that first one movie that was like blew your mind?
I mean, I came of age in the Star Wars Raiders of the Lost Ark era. Those were like things that. One of the earliest memories I ever had was going to see Star Wars in maybe 1979 or 1980 when it was reissued before VHS. And I think I remember it because my father took me and my brother, and I must have been 2 or 3. Like, I was really young, and he locked the keys in the car. So I remember him leaving the two of us in the theater while he went out. And my brother's only 3 years older, so he basically was, I don't know, he wasn't super responsible, but it was just always something that was there, and I think it was more a quest of discovering that it was kind of a particular passion as opposed to something that everybody was into, and it just came easy to me. Film, I remembered movies, I read books about them. I just knew that world, and it just comes from there and just evolved over time. It just became much more obscure, to be frank, and weirder. And I just, especially now that you can see a lot of movies, there are a lot of movies that I'd read about that I wasn't able to see. And then in the subsequent years, I just kind of started watching tons and tons of movies, and just, it's always been there.
Excellent, excellent. Noah, what about you? Where did it all begin for you?
God. Yeah, both my parents are artists, so I kind of grew up around it. But to be completely honest, that I think as a lot of young kids, or maybe not every young kid, but for me, I was like, oh, my parents work in the arts. No, thank you. Was sort of my initial opinion about all of this stuff. But I grew up just really liking movies, storytelling. I don't know if there was like a specific moment where I was like, oh my God, I want to do this. But I think it was just a gradual realization that I there was nothing really else I wanted to do. I mean, I went to film school for writing, actually. And it was sort of just something I always, I don't know, I just love movies. I wish there was a more poetic way of putting it, but I was like obsessed with movies growing up, watched a ton of them. And eventually I was just like, I don't really want to do anything else, so I might as well try to do this.
No, I like that. I like that. Did you start in theater? Did you used to start with?
I was not a theater kid. I played sports, and then I went to boarding school. And then I grew up in Wyoming, and then I went to boarding school. And it was just played sports and just went in my free time would just watch movies. And again, my initial, like, what I wanted to do was writing or directing, mainly writing, just because there was just something, I don't know, it's private, you don't have to deal with people. I was just more into that when I was younger. And I guess as I got older, I began to notice that like my maybe affinity for movies was not the normal, like, oh, what do you want to watch tonight kind of thing, which I think which is a lot of people's relationships. It's like a form of entertainment. It's like, let's just throw this on. And I was just watching so many movies that it was just like, it couldn't possibly, it was like, it just couldn't be that. And then I think I remember seeing Kids, that Larry Clark movie, when I was pretty young, and sort of, I don't know, I just started relating to them differently, I think, and just was like, it became less of like something to kill the time or, take you away to some other place, and more of like, I don't really know how to describe it, just a different sort of experience. And that kind of went from there.
It seems like, go ahead.
Kids was important to me too, actually. I've never thought about this until right now, till you said that. I saw it in the theater when it came out, and I wrote reviews for my high school newspaper.
Yeah, I did that too.
Yeah, I wrote a review of it, and I was like, this is the most realistic portrayal of teenagers I've ever seen, because they curse. And it was definitely like, if they can make a movie out of this, I should try to make a movie. And I was like 16, and I was like, I think I want to try this, because I mean, it doesn't seem easy, but that one was.
No, it was so accessible. I don't think I've ever seen, and that's a heavy movie, and that's not my life, but the like atmosphere and like the way that movie feels is still, I think, the most accurate representation of what it's like to be a kid, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I still don't think we've had anything that's as good as that, as far as just like how people talk, like the way you figure out what it means to be a person, I don't know. That was a big movie for me, for sure.
No, I agree. And I think, watching that for the first time is like, are these actors or just real kids?
No, totally. It's just like this, it's like, what it's like. And I remember sitting I watched it on my computer when I was younger. I remember just sitting there. You see certain movies and you just like don't even get up for a while. I feel like that's an experience with certain movies where you're just like, oh my God. Like, I don't, like, even when you're young and you have that experience too. I remember watching, my mom was like, you should watch this if you're into movies. I was young. I was probably like, I don't know, 11 or something. I mean, she showed me Do the Right Thing. And it was a similar experience where I was like, it's a heavy movie as well, but you just like sit there afterward and you can't really stand up, and you're kind of like, I don't know why this is affecting me as much as it is, but it's just, there's something about the story and the way it looked and the way movies make you feel that, for me at least, is a very singular experience. I don't know.
Oh, that's great.
It's different.
No, I like that. So Andrew, kids, where did it all begin for you?
I mean, that definitely was not my, like, I was very, like, I was very sheltered growing up, but I remember watching it before I went to NYU, and I was like, holy shit, they're going to eat me alive in New York. Like, this is what kids and teenagers are like in New York. I'm fucked. But no, it's like that movie is just like, it's so incredible. I was just like looking at just even stills from it the other day of like young Rosario Dawson and Chloe, and I'm like, they blend into it. I mean, it's just like that's what made me so like scared to go to New York originally. I was like, man, this is the real world, and I guess I haven't really lived in the real world yet in my life. But I guess I survived, or I adapted to New York after that. I didn't really have the kids experience, but it was great to get outside of that comfort zone. I grew up right in Boston, went to like all boys school. So like my origin story is I got tricked into this film world, and that I went to all boys school. I had a great English teacher that said, you should do the plays. And I was like, I'm not going to do the plays. And she said, you get to meet girls if you do the plays. And I said, yes. So I started doing that, and I realized like I really like doing that. And I started watching more and more sort of like non-studio, non-commercial fare cinema. And there was a great cinema that used to be in the Copley Mall in Boston, which now in retrospect is a perfect representation, microcosm of American capitalism. It was a indie movie theater, then it became a Barney's department store, and now it is no longer a Barney's department store because there's no more malls. But it was like at that theater that I remember seeing Memento for the first time, and Igby Goes Down, and like those were like I'm just seeing films that were not done in the studio system, and they were stories that I was excited about potentially being able to tell. And it was like around that time, probably midway through high school, that I decided like this is sort of cool, and people make careers of it, and I know it's really tough, but I started getting that bug to really start to pursue it, and I got more and more into both acting in the plays as well as putting plays together. And when it came time to apply to schools, my parents were stupid enough, I guess, to let me apply to one film school, and I ended up getting into that film school, and I went to NYU, and sort of the rest is history.
Oh my goodness! So we all four of us went to film school. That's amazing. And so I guess the big question is for you: did you get any of the women when you signed up for the film and theater?
I mean, I'm not sure if you know, like theater kids in high school, especially at an all boys, primarily sports centric high school, are really cool. So no. Great. All right. So I'm glad we talked about that. And then, so now we all kind of moved, we all met on the beach house. And I read, Jeffrey, that this script that you wrote for the beach house might have been inspired by a true life story.
There's a lot of actually true life stories that kind of come into it. One was a story my mother told me about a fishing trip that her father and her two brothers went on to Minnesota. And this is like in the 50s. And my grandfather, they had been drinking beer, and they all went to sleep, and he woke up in the middle of the night to piss. And when he went outside, he got very sick, and he realized that there was a gas leak in the cabin that they were staying in. So he got his sons out, and it saved their lives. And he would always say that beer saved his life because he was drinking and he had to pee. So there was that, which plays into one aspect of it. And then kind of another ironic aspect of it was I was dating a woman, and we went with another couple to Cape Cod to kind of have like a fun weekend. And it was basically the beginning of the end of my relationship. It did not go well. I don't remember exactly why, but it just was like, this is supposed to be romantic, and it's not. Like, we're not speaking. Like, I guess this is, the beginning of the end. And I was always kind of the irony of going to these vacation places where it rains every day, or getting sick. Like, sometimes when you travel and you spend all this money to go to like a resort, and then you get sick and you can't do any of the fun things that you planned on because you're ill. And so it's kind of that contrast, and that irony was something about vacation homes that that kind of formulated a lot of the beginning kind of true life kernels of the story. And then just over time, it got a little bit more and more out there. But yeah, those are two kind of big touchstones to the initial thrust of the movie.
Okay, so you wrote it and said, how did these three amigos all meet up? And did y'all instantly love each other? You three.
I mean, there's another producer, Sophia Lynn, who was involved with the movie from a very early point, and she was with it. And then I think, Andrew, we met at IFP. Was that when we initially met?
Yeah, I'm not even sure if it was for this, but
no.
So Sophia and I have been friends for a while. Jeff and Sophia have been friends for longer than that. And I think that Jeff and I had met just socially or through one of the, IFP speed dating type things a while ago. And I'm not sure if I remembered when Sophia brought me the script again, which, was about a year or so, or a year and a half before we ended up going into production on the Beach House. But, Sophia knew that I was, that I was doing a bunch in the sort of the genre space. And she said, listen, there's this great script that I've been trying to do for a bit, and it's with one of my best friends, and I think you'll really like it. And she shared it with me, and she obviously knew my taste because I was like, this is really good. And then I saw Sulfuric, which was Jeff's short, and I was like, yeah, this guy knows his shit. So we just started talking, and it's probably a question coming up in a bit, but another part of what made me immediately say I wanted to get involved and work with Jeff and Sophia was that I saw this location. So just ironically, where Jeff went on that, that failed outing as with like his relationship outing years before is one town over for where I've gone every summer for, a lot of my adult life with my family, which is in Cape Cod. So once I read that, I was like, I know where these places are. And I've always wanted to find something to shoot there. And it just organically lent itself so nicely. And Jeff knew that world, and he captured it so well on the page. And I was like, listen, sign me up. I want to, I want to help you bring this to life.
That's awesome. And I think being filmed at Cape Cod, it was beautiful. I wish they would do like a promo for Cape Cod and show this movie. It's like, come to Cape Cod.
The water is fine. Yes.
Yeah,
the water's fine.
Noah, when did you join the forces?
I not too long before shooting started. Like a month or so, a couple months. So I just was sent into an audition, or maybe it was an audition tape. And then I ended up meeting with Jeff in the city, and one thing led to another, and then we all ended up in Cape Cod. So I wasn't a part of it for as long as these two fine gentlemen here, but I don't know. I'm very glad I was a part of it for the time I was a part of it. I mean, I think Jeff and I met, and we just started talking about movies and music. And I really liked the script when I read it. It seemed, I think certain scripts, like we were saying earlier, certain movies just sort of feel different. This one, you read a lot of script when you're auditioning for stuff, and this one just felt like it just felt better and different than a lot of stuff. And I felt it was an interesting take on a genre that I feel like doesn't always get super interesting takes. I feel like a lot of times it's very generic, the stuff that's in the horror genre, and this was not that. And Jeff liked metal and movies, and I was like, let's do this. That's enough for me.
I'm pretty sure, Noah, I think you were the first one of the four that we cast.
Yeah, because I remember you guys were looking for Liana's the actress for that still. I think because I remember I think I was the first, honestly.
And I don't think it was that far before we started. I think you might have been like maybe 2 or 3 weeks at most.
It was not a long time, yeah.
No, and then Liana, I never met her until we were in Cape Cod. That was like the first time I ever met her in person. And
yeah. I remember that.
Well, because she's LA based, and so it was kind of tricky in that respect. But yeah, and I remember just meeting Noah. I got along with Noah, and there were things that I thought he could bring to the role that were not necessarily on the page, and it was just, the character he's not Randall at all, and that's kind of like it's kind of funny now that everyone's the consensus is like Randall's not a great guy, and I am always defensive of him because it's like he's 20 something, he's just he's learning, and then but it was very much about kind of the rapport that I had with him, and that was like when we had that lunch meeting, it was beyond just looking at him and listening to him and hearing the tone of his voice and kind of watching his mannerisms. But just the fact that I could get along with him, because I knew that, being a first-time director, I needed to have a cast that was going to be a little patient as I kind of fumbled around in the dark to find, the movie and kind of find my own footing as a director. And I could tell with Noah that he was going to give me, a little bit of leeway in that respect, for better or for worse. But, it was definitely a personality, vibe, and we got along, and he was a great benefit to the movie.
I mean, just adding on, I feel like it's so much about movie making in general, especially like things of this size and stuff like that. It's like you have to be able to get along with the people you're working with, or it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. Like, if you don't like, I mean, that's any job really, but I think especially movies where like you're with each other all the time and it's pressures, it's time sensitive. You have to get stuff done. And it's stressful. And it's like an inherently emotional process for everyone. I think that's a huge part of it, is just, do personalities mesh, right? And do you trust each other? Because there's a huge amount of trust that goes into any of this stuff. From my end and from Jeff, like, he's trusting with the script. He's broadened the world and his vision as a director. And I'm trusting him to not make me look like an asshole. Like, you think, you go in there thinking like, you have an idea of the choices you're going to make for a role or whatever, and you have your idea of the character, but there's a huge difference between what happens in your head and what actually happens when you're there. And I think if you all trust each other and you trust the vision of where we're going, it'll work. And if you don't, that's when things usually tend to fall off the tracks, I think.
And it seemed like it was a very, close-knit group of people working on this movie that all had a passion for this story. So
yeah, I mean, it was, it's not a multi-million-dollar blockbuster film. So, it was, we were a lean and mean crew. We shot for 3 weeks on location in the Cape. It's about, I'd say, 20 or so of us all together. So, I mean, yeah, we were, everyone, as Noah was saying, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you don't get along, shit doesn't happen. And so luckily we had a really great group of folks that just people really meshed, and we were able to be really efficient with our filmmaking, but also like no one really hated each other at the end, which it happens. That definitely does happen on certain sets. But no, it was like, and a lot of people were staying, in houses together in the Cape. No one was really more than a couple miles away from, or, it was pretty much within a mile's distance. The beautiful part about shooting in somewhere like Cape Cod in the off season. So before Memorial Day starts, is that we pretty much had the neighborhood, the whole town to ourselves, for better or for worse. So, when Liana yells Randall at the top of her lungs, like, no one actually calls the cops. So, likewise, just, we also got to just hang out with each other and really get to know everyone on a personal level. And it made everyone feel invested in the film, which was really exciting.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And so after I watched the movie, the credits rolled. I like to stay through the credits. And I got this vision in my head, and I was like, oh my goodness, I picture H.P. Lovecraft and Stephen King wanting to go on a vacation to a beach house. And this is what happened in this movie. And like, kind of like that 50s-esque sci-fi horror that parallels with a relationship that is going to go down a path the same way the world does. So I just thought that was like really wonderful. And like, did any of this come into your mind, Jeff, when you were writing and making it?
I mean, I would say it was, H.P. Lovecraft and Stephen King, and Shirley Jackson was probably riding in the car as well. And J.G. Ballard might have made the house. But yeah. I mean, they're all in there. I read a lot. There are things like Stephen King I read when I was very young. I've read some H.P. Lovecraft. There's The Color Out of Space, of course, is a big, very. That's my favorite story of his. I think it's his best story, and it's kind of, I think it's a very scary. That's like his most scary story. I think it's a very primal thing. And Shirley Jackson has a great story called The Summer People. That was another kind of influence on the mood of, a a town, a beach town or a coastal vacation town off season. And that was a mood that I really wanted to capture because it's spooky when you come to places that are so lively and full of life and fun. And then when you go there off season, when all the fun is gone, there's a ghostliness to it that's inherent in the environment. And that was a goal of mine to try to capture that because it's another one of those things that, I feel and I've thought about, but I haven't really seen explored in movies. And so, and then when we started shooting all these kind of influences and references, they just go right out the window and you kind of hold on for dear life. And you kind of throw things in the air and hopefully some of it sticks. But yeah, I mean, they were there those writers were there with me at some point, in the process. And it was, and Stephen King is just a massive, if you're into, American horror, you can't escape him. He's like Spielberg is to film. Stephen King is to horror fiction. He's a massive, massive influence. And so they're there in the vacation.
I loved it. And I have to bring up the music of the film. Part of my podcast network, we do have composers on, and I believe Rolf Porter did your music.
Rolly Porter.
Yeah. Porter. I just thought the music was excellent in it. How did you come across him, and how did this happen?
It was another thing in speaking with Andrew about it. When I really wanted a composer who was a musician beyond just being a composer. There was something, I couldn't tell you why, but that's something that happens, I think, more and more in film. But one of the prerequisites is that the composer we picked had to have done a film before. And Rolly had done another, I want to say, either an Irish or Scottish film called In Fear, which I liked. I thought it's a very simple movie, and I thought it was good. And he was game. Rolly is actually really into science fiction. If you look at his first album, the song titles are actually the names of planets from Dune. So he was very into it, and we really kind of clicked. He is based in Bristol, so the entire process was done via Skype. He would send me things, I would listen to it. We kind of just went back and forth. But it was very much we didn't want to emulate John Carpenter's score, which I love John Carpenter. I love his movies, and I like his music, and I like it when it's used in films. But we both decided that very early on that it was a little. Our film is not like that. It's not a reference to the 80s Carpenter movies, and we didn't want to go down that route. I think we were kind of in the process when Stranger Things was just coming out, which I think really utilized that to its best degree. And so we wanted something different, and Rolly's music is very dynamic and very loud, and I wanted a loud, noisy score. I wanted to wake the audience up. And also, Rolly, we agreed that a lot of horror movies are overscored, and so the first half of our film, there's very, very little music, which is, I think a risk. We took a lot of risks with it because the music helps the pace of films, and I wanted a very deliberate, slow pace. And when you take the music out, the movie slows down. So it was one of my favorite things was working with him because I'd never really worked with a composer before. And so it was great to have that type of collaboration. And on top of that, Noah, when we were shooting, was into this band called Nails, who is, they have this album, and it's another You Will Never Be One of Us. It's one of the most intense albums I've ever heard. And coincidentally, Rolly was into it as well. So when he was like, "Oh, have you heard this Nails album?" And I was like, "Actually, I have." But it makes you sweat. You listen to it, it's like 20 minutes and you're just like sweating by the end, and then you break something and then you cry. It was a weird kind of coincidence with that.
That's great to hear. Because I really liked it. I want a soundtrack on vinyl. Mondo, please do it.
Please
do it. We'll do that.
That stuff is so cool.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing. And Noah, you and your co-star Liana, as well as the other two, you're thrown through the ringer a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about getting the character? Was there any behind the scenes shining moments where you're frothing at the mouth, getting into character, or is it just kind of go?
I mean, gosh. Well, first, I feel like Liana had it rougher than I did. She had there's one bit where she's crawling through ooze towards the end of the film, and that was that was brutal. It was cold in the Cape when we were doing it. But I also think, I honestly, in a way, I think like, I don't know, that was the most fun part of the movie for me in a way. I feel like we talked about this last time we spoke about the movie, but you know, you don't always get to like do I feel like the fun part of being in a horror movie sometimes is that you get to like scream and like act like you're dying and convulse and get covered in goo. Like it's fun. It's fun. It's like, you know, it's like when you're a kid, at least when I was a kid, pretending like, you know, playing pretend or whatever, you're usually not like, you know, acting out like a really intense like marriage scene, like talking about like, you know, you're not, when you're in the backyard as a kid, you're not reenacting Marriage Story. You're doing like Lord of the Rings or something like that. And I feel like with this, you know, I guess I looked up and like researched what happens, you know, what happens to the body, the symptoms, the experiences of people that have had various uncomfortable diseases. So I got that into my head, and then you just sort of go for it. And everyone's felt deeply uncomfortable at one point or another, from like food poisoning or a really bad cold or whatever it is. Or, you know, I had scarlet fever when I was really little. So I have I've been very sick before. And you just sort of try and get into that headspace, and then you just go with it. And that's the fun of it, you know?
Oh, I like that. Well, I'm sorry you had scarlet fever and you were really sick, though.
I'm fine. I mean, I'm fine now, I think.
And Andrew, your film resume is quite impressive with Martha, Marcy May, Marlene, and We Are What We Are, two films that I dearly love. I've talked to the people in those films. I love it. And then you have The Beach House, another perfect movie. And I was like, what is the method to your madness in picking these movies you produce? Like, what? Take me down that avenue. It's like, oh, these fucking cool indie flicks. I love it.
I mean, I think it's just that. I think it's madness. I mean, I think I'd be hard pressed to really connect the dots with what really unites the three of those films, or just many films on my resume. But I guess, you know, the commonality in the three of them is that I was working with directors that I just really believed in, that just were very clear in their vision for the stories. Because, you know, you can read a great script or you can read a great treatment, and if the director doesn't have a clear inroad of how they actually bring that to the screen, you know, it's just not worth it. And so, you know, I started my career working with Sean's company, with Borderline Films, and, you know, I learned pretty much most of what I know from Sean, and I consider him like a mentor and one of my really good friends. And so I saw him sort of work on his craft from the ground up, first as a producer on the early films, and then with Martha, I saw him put it all together. Then We Are What We Are, Jim is just a master, and being able to give him a little bit more runway from Mulberry Street to Stakeland, just knowing what he was capable of. I was just really excited that we found this project, because I'd seen the original and was like, this guy can bring something even more special to the table with this. And then likewise with Jeff, you know, he had this short that I saw a lot of promise in, and then coupled with a great script, you know, I just, with all three of those people, that they had this vision, but they never along the way stopped to say, like, no one else can bring something to the table. That's the sign of really like a great director, and the type of directors that I want to just continue to work with throughout my career are people that know what they're doing, have a clear vision, but are welcome to basically bring advice and, you know, input from anywhere, as long as, you know, be open to where advice can come from. So, yeah, I mean, they're all very different. Like, I never want to be pigeonholed into one type of genre, like one type of subsect of the genre, or even just genre overall. And that's my dog standing up on the computer and thus moving my computer. But yeah, I mean, I love this space, and, you know, I guess what sort of also unites them all is that they're a sort of a brand of horror that's, you know, elevated. I think that all three of them very clearly have different messages at the heart of their stories. So that's, I guess that's what I really want to continue to build my career with, is genre that has a message, and with people that I like personally and I believe in, and that can execute their vision.
Pretty good. I like it. And now we have to talk about Paul Rice and I'm going to butcher his name, Fanjay Chen, the visual and special effects people for the film. Am I pronouncing Mr. Chen's?
Yeah, I think he was one of the more. I think he had something to do with the digital component. So Paul, we can talk about Paul. What I guess my question to you would be, what aspect you want to talk about, like the practical kind of goop effects and
right, like so a little bit of both, because I think they actually like blended in really well together.
Noah, do you remember what substance was used for slime on your face? Do you remember what it was?
Wasn't it? Yeah. Isn't it Lubriderm or no? It wasn't. It was. What is it? It's some sort of lube.
Astroglide.
Astroglide. Yeah. Astroglide. It was something. So I was like, I knew it was something like that. Yeah. It was. I was covered in it for a while. So there's kind of three components to the practical effects. You have our makeup artist who's named Jennifer Suarez, and she kind of dealt with the kind of day-to-day makeup and dealt with kind of contacts and blood. And she also was the one who discovered, after a couple of days, she's like, you know what really works for slime is lube, because it doesn't dry up. And so I think actually as we got into it, I would just take it on my hand and be like, no, you ready? And he's like, yeah. And I just smeared it all over his face. I think I got a little thrill out of it. And then, so there's Jen, who's dealing with the actors. Paul Rice is our production designer, and he fabricated a lot of the worms and the jellyfish, and a lot of the slime effects coming out of the sink was actually much more of a to-do than you would think. And then our makeup effect artists were Bryan Spears and Pete Gerner, who are very in the New York area. They're one of the like big. They do a lot of the movies from all of Larry Fessenden's movies to Marvel shows. They're really kind of in this area. And so Paul and Jen were really involved throughout the entire shoot. And then we brought in like special teams, like Pete came in kind of towards the end. But then some of the foot scene and some of the basement, it's like all hands were on deck. So it's like 4 or 5 people are kind of like getting under there, and one's throwing slime, one's operating like a spurter, and everyone got a little messy. But it was really kind of, when you're doing a small movie like this, you have to wear a lot of hats. So I feel that there's a real teamwork component involved in that. And then when we were getting into those much more involved effects scenes, it was just everyone was kind of coming in. I think, between the actors, they couldn't really do much because they're reacting to it, but we enjoyed getting them messy. I still don't know how you did the vomit scene. No, I watch it and it's kind of like, that's the magic of movies. But yeah, and it kind of that's how it worked. I would try to give ideas, and a lot of the movie wasn't storyboarded. We had shot lists, but when we got into the effects, we would have storyboards, or I would draw some images as a start. We had a storyboard artist for some of it, but and we didn't really match the storyboards, but we used them as kind of a guidepost. But yeah, it got complicated and it got messy.
No, for sure. It reminded me a little bit of like Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell working on an Evil Dead shoot, just everybody getting in it and getting dirty.
Oh yeah. I
like that. And then of course the great surgery scene on a limb, which was just, I imagine, I don't know how filming that scene and just making it work perfectly watching it, because that scene just kind of, I'm not usually easily squeamish, but I was like, oh man, this is like hurting me right now.
I mean, one of the biggest things about that is Liana's performance. She sells it very well, and I think a lot of the squeamishness comes from her more so than the gore per se. She just really, really killed that scene. And it was, I think, I won't talk forever, but like, I think it was one of the strongest scenes in the script, and it's one of the closest from the script to what you see in the movie. I think it was a very strong set piece, and it just really shot the same way. It was one of the longest days I think we shot. We did a lot of coverage of her coming into the beach house and the whole surgery and everything like that. But when we were shooting it, there was definitely an electricity, and you could see it on people's faces one of our other producers, his name was Tyler Davidson, and he was pretty chill. But I just remember when we were doing that, he was very happy. He was like, this is looking really good. I just remember him being happy, and Andrew was always enthusiastic for the gore. He would always be like, there should be a little bit more blood in that. And so, it's like all the producers kind of had their different kind of components to it. But that in particular was a really great day, I think, for everybody. I think Noah might have visited, even though I don't think he was on that day. But I think he came by and was kind of like, whoa. But,
yeah, it was. Well, I remember I came by, and then I remember hearing it. Like I heard her yelling, and I was like, and then I remember, and then I left for a second, then I came back right when you guys were finishing up, and I remember seeing it, and it's pretty gross. I mean, this is coming from someone who grew up like in the early days. I'm born in the early '90s, so early internet where there were no rules, and you're like 14, and I've seen some really heinous stuff on the internet, and that was still got me. So I think that's a testament to the way it was shot, to Liana, the effects, the prosthetic, all of that stuff.
Wonderful. No, it looked great. Also, for Jeff, so you've worked on stuff like the OA, Spider-Man 3, Super Troopers, Wolf of Wall Street. Working on all of these films in some capacity, what do you take with you into something like The Beach House?
I mean, I can talk for hours about this. So I'm going to try not to. Production, I think, is kind of a misnomer in terms of how it's titled. It should really be execution. I think that on film sets, a lot of people don't make decisions; they execute others. And definitely in a location's production, you are executing other people's decisions. And so for me, it was more of an efficiency. I think that having that background, especially in the production aspect of it, I kind of wanted to make decisions quickly, so that we weren't hemming and hawing over what to do, because I knew that we didn't have a lot of time. And so especially with picking the house that Andrew's father presented to us, and I was like, I don't want to seem too easy, and this is like one of the first houses we saw, but I was like, this one could totally work. And but I think that was the lesson, kind of the through line to everything I've done in my career, which is I have lost track of how many productions I've worked on. I think it's around 100, but I have no idea. But the efficiency and the decision, making a decision, not knowing exactly, even if it's the wrong decision, but sometimes making a decision is more important than worrying about whether or not it's the right or wrong one. And you make a decision and move forward. And then sometimes great things come out of accidents and mistakes. So I think that was a big part of what I carried through to this.
All right. Awesome. All right. Question for each of you. Same question for each of you. What is your most thrilling film experience, both as a talent and as a fan?
Let me think about that one. You guys could start.
So something like, was it like as a talent, you like working with somebody, or as a fan, like when you first saw the premiere of a movie or something like that, most thrilling? And I guess for Noah, it could be most thrilling music experience as a talent and as a fan.
Gosh, I'll try and go first. Most thrilling.
Go ahead.
Do you know yours for sure?
I have the film going. I have a couple. I saw the premiere of Boogie Nights at the New York Film Festival in like 1996, and I'd wanted to see it, but it was also before the internet. And that movie it was the most. I was just knocked out of the theater, and like Paul Thomas Anderson was there. It was just like, oh man, I really felt like I was in on some sort of. It was just I love that. I still love that movie. I watched it recently. I think it holds up. It's a unique film for him, but that was definitely for the film going. That's one of them. I have a couple other ones, but that one was it. And then making the movie, someone asked me once about like, was it fun? And I don't necessarily think filmmaking is fun. It's like, is jumping out of a plane fun? Like, I guess it's like, it's more than fun. When something goes right, it's like when Noah or Liana, when they bring something, or when there's a contribution from a crew member that elevates it. When our DP, Owen, there's a shot where the camera falls over and he thought of that on the moment. And it was like, that punctuates the scene. That's the end of the scene. And just like when things go right, it's it's not fun. It's I don't know what the next thing with what's more than fun, you know. But yeah, those are my two contributions. You guys go crazy.
Most thrilling viewing experience. I'm gonna have to think for a while. I mean, there's just so many. I feel like some of like my most thrilling movie experiences haven't even been. I mean, I love going to the theater, and I hope it lasts forever. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like some of my most impactful moments, like the kids moment, right? I was alone in my parents' living room on my computer. Like there was nothing like crazy about that, but I found that movie to be incredibly impactful. I mean, I remember going to see Star Wars when I was really little. There was like a reissue thing, and I went with one of my other friends, and that was a moment. That's such a huge movie, especially when you're young. I think that movie, it's almost overwhelming. You're like, and so that I'll never forget. And that was like 4 when I saw that, and that's one of probably my earliest movie-going experiences. I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for that. There's no like one. I mean, I've seen so many movies where I walk out and I'm like, oh my God, that was mind blowing. But I can't really say one over the other. I don't know. My first kiss was in a movie theater, so like I feel like that's probably, if I'm honest, like my most impactful. Right? My most.
Was it during the movie?
Yeah, during the movie.
Which movie?
What movie was it? What movie was it?
Aeon Flux, I think it's what it's called. It was like that. No offense to that movie, but I'm not saying it's the greatest movie of all time. But I think that was my first kiss, so can't complain. And then as far as most thrilling experiences working on something, I did a movie with Nicolas Cage, which was amazing. I'm a huge fan of his, and just getting to hang out with him. And we were in Canada, and we were the only 2 people that were on for the run of the project. We were there the whole time together, and just getting to talk. He's so interesting, and he's so like open, and he was just like talk to me about anything. And he's a huge movie fan, which makes it's just fun, like talking about the movies he liked, and we're both big Elvis fans, and talking about Elvis and like all the insane experiences he's had, and like his process, which I think is so interesting because I'm a fairly reserved person, and he is not, and he just does not care, and he just goes for it, which I think as an artist is really, something to celebrate. Even if I don't agree with all the choices he makes, he commits 1,000% to the choices he does make. And I think that is something, regardless of what you think of them, that is something that is hard to do. I mean, my dad always said growing up, like the hardest thing to be is like to be an individual, and he is an individual. It's not like an act. It's not a shtick. He's not like trying to be cool or interesting, which I feel like a lot of people do, where it's like this careful, it's like I'm weird, but it's like a carefully curated weird. He's just who he is 100% through and through. And working with that was just a really cool, I'll never forget that. And then I guess the other one would be, I played a show with some of my friends at the Troubadour a little while ago. And they're a bunch of my best friends in the world. And it's someone who grew up loving like 70s music, like Little Feat, Fleetwood Mac, stuff like that. Playing the show there where it's still the same pretty much, you know what I mean? It's still like, it's still like, it's amazing, but it's also kind of junky still. Like nothing has changed really. And just being there with those people, I would say that's like the other moment where you're like, oh my, I get it, but that's so defined by like the people I'm doing it with. Like it's all my best friends. And I guess the cool thing about music is that it's if you do get to do it with your friends, it's like this super, it's so like immediate, and it's happening then, and you're doing it. It's just like a sort of, I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, Nick, and then with my best friend. So those are the 2.
Right on.
I'm gonna steal that, Noah. Yeah, I've been fortunate enough. I've produced 2 films by my 2 best friends. So Bryan Reesberg did Big Significant Things, which I produced, and Andrew Renzi did a film called The Benefactor, which I produced. And like, those are my two best friends in the world. And I got to make a movie with them, which I don't think there's anything cooler than being able to go in the trenches with someone that like you love as a friend, as like a brother, and get to do right by them, both like work and personally and everything. So that was awesome. And then, yeah, it's just, I mean, this is such a crazy world we're in, that like you get to meet these people that they seem so unattainable or so far outside of the realm of normalcy. And then you see them on a set and like you have a beer with them and you realize that this is just like, just shoot the shit. So, I mean, some of my favorite memories are just like literally just that, like shooting the shit with John Hawkes when he first got to Martha. And I remember he stayed in my apartment in New York the night before. And he like, first time I met him in person, because we talked on email on the phone, when he got to set, he was like, "Don't worry, I didn't snoop." And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't think you would snoop in my apartment, but I appreciate that, John." But then he referenced a book that was on my bookshelf, which actually was a copy of Sex for Dummies, which I have. And then I asked him, I said, "Did you look inside the book?" And he goes, "Yes," which of course then he was like, "Oh, so you were really snooping." The reason I have the book is because I had done a project years before with Dr. Ruth Vestheimer, and it was autographed. It said, "To Andrew, best of luck." I'm assuming best of luck in sex, Dr. Ruth. So it's like one of my prized possessions, but like, you know, I had that with John, that we were just, you know, connecting over the fact that he was staying in my apartment, looking through my shit. But no, I don't know. I love this world. It can be as something as like amazing as that, as hanging out with these incredible actors and filmmakers and artists, or just like that simple pleasure and joy of like, totally a, normal day in the life of going to see at the Village Cinema East, or no, it was at the Forum in New York, of seeing Holy Motors and not knowing anything about it, just one random day, and being like, holy shit, like what is this? And that's just the power of movie making and cinemas, to go in completely unaware and be blown away. And I mean, I'm not trying to make the leap so eloquently of Holy Motors to us, but like, I do hope that people learn or research as little as possible before they see Beach House, so that hopefully some people can have that like, holy shit moment of what did I just see?
And I think y'all perfectly captured that. I really like that. And I love that, working with friends and colleagues, that is like one of the best feelings. I totally agree with that. Okay. So my last question for you three, it's another fun one, make you think. And I ask everyone this, what certain scenes from film, what certain scenes in motion pictures always inspire you, that you always think about? You wake up, you're like, oh, that scene is so great, whether it be, the asshole joke in Spaceballs, or Spud trying to get the job interview and fucking it up in Train Spotting. What are some great scenes that always stick with you?
I mean, I was just thinking about Boogie Nights. And at the end of Boogie Nights, when they go to Alfred Molina's, his house,
the firecrackers, yeah,
the fire, which is from Putney Swope, which I just saw. Which is a weird movie, but that's actually totally lifted from Putney Swope. But it's just a mixture of Alfred Molina is an amazing actor. Marky Mark has never been better. The look of vacancy on his face, where he comes to the realization of what his life has become, is just, it gets me every time. Thomas Jane is amazing in that scene. He's great in the movie, but in that scene, he kills it. I'm getting chills thinking about that scene. The use of music, which I think is a very Scorsese kind of introduced, using, pop music and rock music in movies. And Paul Thomas Anderson and Boogie Nights just hit it so far out of the park in that scene. I mean, that's the first one that comes to mind right off, because I was just thinking about it. But I've got a couple more, but I'll let someone else take over.
I like that answer, because doing this for a number of years, I can't tell you how many huge filmmakers and actors have named that scene, and it's quite amazing to hear that.
It just works. It's like I know he thought about that for years. He was thinking about how I'm going to light the audience up with what is about to transpire. And it totally works. Every choice that he made as a director, even the like, today I was thinking about it while I was doing the dishes or something, like Thomas Jane stumbles up the stairs as he's coming to it. I love it when people fall in movies. And that is just like, just another like layer on the onion of that scene, which I think is just really, really so great.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll take it. I mean, God, I mean, I feel like there's certain they stick out for different reasons. I mean, I would probably say at the end of the day, Badlands, the Malick, is my favorite movie ever. And like basically, like I don't know that whole thing. Pick a scene, any scene. Like just it's just amazing when they're out in the woods, like dancing around. I mean, I've watched that movie like a million times, and every single time I see it, I'm like, how did he do this? He just was like, I'll make a movie, I guess, and then like did Badlands. I mean, everything that Sissy Spacek does in that is pretty perfect. What other the scene in Mean Streets when he's entering the bar and I think is it Street Fighting Man that's playing? There's a Stone song, I can't remember, but it's like a dolly shot behind him and it's all red and he's moving into the bar and it's the music's playing, you're all into it, and then just that scene. I'm trying to remember what happens. That I remember watching that for the first time, being like, "Holy shit, this is crazy." And then I guess there's another scene. When I was in film school, I feel like this is kind of a generic answer, but in Children of Men, that the really, really long take. I mean, I feel like that's sort of that was another that was a movie I watched when I was really getting into like trying to figure out like how people were doing things. And I remember watching them like I just like didn't understand it. I was like, I don't know how this is possible. And I would like look it up on YouTube and like try and like slow it down and try and figure out like what they were doing to like cheat it basically. And there are certain scenes like that where you're just like, I just can't even, I don't know how you thought this. Like, because on the page, right? Like, I think that's always an interesting moment when you're watching movies. It's like, when you think about what it was written on the page, that there are certain moments that are like so, I mean, that's a pretty dramatic scene, but it doesn't, it's nothing, there's nothing really that out of the ordinary of it, right? And then how a director or cinematographer, actors, what they bring to it and how it changes from the written word to that magical thing when movies happen, right? Where there's this space that happens and that all the gaps are filled in. And I think that's a really great example of it. Like, how do we take a car ride and make the audience feel it in a totally different way that's not just like, you know, shot, reverse shot, like a wide or two shot, and then like, you know, so the stuff like that always sticks out to me.
I would say like, I mean, I watch everything, and like I was like thinking for a second, I was like, what have I watched recently? And I was even gonna like reference like a scene from like About Time, the terrible like romantic film, but like, you know what, I love that shit. But like, I'd say the movie that I always come back to, and I just watched it like again about a month ago, is like Hook is what brings my brothers and me together. And growing up, like honestly, like it's still, I mean, just for me to have found this path into genre, rewatching the scene where the two kids get taken from the bedroom, stolen by Hook, spoiler alert. But you have this tight shot on the door of the handle, which has the hook lifting up. And you basically have this overhead shot of the covers being pulled from them. And it's fucking terrifying still. I can imagine like me watching it as a preteen or like in grade school and not being scared. But like even now, it just like, it's filled with just such magic that you have these scenes in the beginning, that the soft lighting with Maggie Smith. And then you have, you know, sort of the green undertones with Hook being introduced, the green and the red. I love that movie. Like that just, it's like everything about it. I probably could, if someone were to say, like the film print burned and you have to draw by hand every like still from that movie, I probably could do it because I also know most of the lines as well. But it just was so formative, and it just comes back to the heart of, you know, why a lot of us get into this world is it brings the people together. Like my brothers and I, we live all over the world. We all do very different things, but it's one movie we can all throw a quote at each other and just it like brings so much joy to us, as well as like, I still think it's still Steven Spielberg, and it's maybe not his best film, but it's still top-notch filmmaking that he brings to a really enjoyable subject.
I completely agree. I think it's an overlooked film and wonderful performances from Hoffman and Williams.
Hoffman's incredible in that film.
Yeah.
I mean, and Robin Williams. I don't think they can or should ever remake Hook, but just like that innocence, that like joy that was so at the heart of who Robin Williams was. Like you feel that of like someone that's trying to like, again, like I can picture all the scenes when he's like at the beginning and he's this stuck up like adult and he's trying to be so rigid. You can tell that there's something inside that just wants to be let out. And that's just what made him such a special actor. And likewise with Dustin Hoffman is he's playing this maniacal evil character that's like he's the personification of evil, and yet he has a smile on his face because he's having so much fun doing it. It's like, I love that movie.
No, yeah, it had all of that, and it has like these really genuine, heartfelt moments of, you know, when he finally crows, and you know everybody, and in the funny scene of the food fight and calling each other names. It's better than people give it credit for, I think. So, well, thank you.
See The Beach House and then go see Hook again.
Yeah, yes, double feature. The Beach House, everyone, on Shudder. You know, get that Shudder and watch the Beach House. You're gonna love it. And I think this is taking that genre, the sci-fi, the horror genre, in that direction we need it. And congratulations to you all. Thank you for joining